Welcome one, welcome all. Episode XV of Three Brothers Talking.
We're switching up our categorizing.
We're gonna go completely to Roman numerals now. Yep. That's gonna be that's our thing.
Yep.
The kids love the Roman numerals.
That way it's a challenge for you guys to actually decipher what number we're at.
Yes. So we're educating people. We're giving back.
Yeah.
Some people try to make their podcast more enjoyable through upping production value or content, but we're just
we don't have that.
No, we don't. So we're gonna go with this instead.
Yeah.
But it is episode 15 of Three Brothers Talking.
15.
And it's just Andrew and I today.
Technically, Two Brothers Talking.
Two Brothers
EP.
Talking. This is our second Two Brothers Talking episode.
Yep.
Jeremy could not be here because his voice is dead.
Yeah.
He woke up and has no voice.
It would have sounded very poor.
It would have sounded bad.
Yeah.
Yes. So he's on the mend, hopefully. So next episode he'll be back.
He's riding the pine for this episode.
He's on the injured reserve.
Yeah.
He's on the 14-day DL, just like in baseball. But since it's just Andrew and I, we're going to spend this time talking about fantasy football and fantasy English soccer for the year.
Up to date. Yeah.
Yes, that's Andrew and I's true passion. We like the Bible and stuff, but
but fall is here and fantasy is back.
Exactly. But I'm looking forward to a good year. I am a 2-time defending champion of our fantasy football league.
Yes.
Not to brag.
And I am the 2-time commissioner.
You know what? I never won until you and I began sharing commissioner rights.
Switched it, yeah.
So there you go. I lost every time I was a commissioner.
I think I won the first year that I wasn't. Yeah, that you were doing it, but
I've never won when I'm in charge of the league. I've only won when I'm not in charge.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah,
a lot. So we also do the Fantasy Premier Soccer, which I had one year. I got second in a league in that, which was great. And
that's more of a challenge to keep up with.
Yeah, it is a lot more a challenge, and also I'm way worse at it. So I wouldn't. It's a lot of fun though, if you like soccer.
Yeah.
But we won't spend our whole time talking about that. We have our draft coming up soon, so probably in the coming months you'll hear trash talk on the podcast amongst us about who's winning. But no, we're here flying solo without Jeremy today.
Mm-hmm.
And
we'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes, man. This is I've done one with just Jeremy, but you and I have never been, in solitary confinement like this. We're in a new studio today.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in
we've tried out 7 or 8 different studios.
We're in Studio 5.
Yeah.
So maybe this is the best sounding one. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a chance you might hear somebody playing the drums at some point during it, but that's the surprise.
Yeah.
But we were going to sit down and talk today about hymns, not just hymns, but worship and music in the church and everything, because this is something that Andrew, you had brought up about something that you wanted us to sit down and talk about.
Yeah.
So go ahead, and what was on your mind as far as figuring this out?
I just wanted to get into a little bit about why I think it's healthy to have still in corporate worship, like in your church today, to have a healthy dose of some old hymns, and the basis for that I think we both kind of adhere to a little bit. And then also talk a little bit about just worship music today and how maybe things have shifted a little bit, just with the vast amounts of production value that we have, and where that's taken kind of what a lot of churches as far as Sunday morning worship come to, and how things might have shifted a little bit. So kind of those two pieces.
Yeah. I think something that I don't think we spend a lot of time thinking about it in the church is how and why we worship the way that we do.
Yeah.
I think for most people, it's just kind of I don't know, I just go to this church because I like it, or kind of that's just how it is. I don't know, I don't think about it too much. But there are some profound theological aspects to the practical hows of worship that we do.
Yeah.
No matter what church you're in, like how we worship and what we do during worship often says a lot about what we think of God and what we think of his word, what we think of the church in general and what it is. So that's kind of what we want to talk about. Now, we're not the kind of podcast, or I hope the kind of guys that are just going to sit down and say like, start trashing specific styles of church.
Yeah.
We have, just as in our last podcast about Josh Harris or whatever, we don't have much of an interest to tear down specific churches or people, we don't care about that, because what we want to get at is kind of understanding and appreciation for worship in the corporate sense.
Yeah.
But not tie it to this kind of church is better than that kind of church.
Yeah. But just also maybe calling attention to somebody for the first time of like being intentional and actually, visualizing and seeing like how you are. Cause a lot of times, like you said, we're just going through and we look at our Sunday service or whatever, and it's just like, it's something where you get to your corporate worship and you just go through and sing the songs that your church would have you sing. And a lot of times you don't think of that. And even today, I think a lot of people kind of detach that from the actual, like the worship is just something you get through, and you sing your songs and all that. And then it's separate from what you're getting fed in, as far as like a sermon and actual church. So, and that's why I think it's all like kind of getting back to the point of like, there is a whole point to the structure of like corporate worship together and tying it all together in one type of thing again. So
there's if you really want to go in deep in the weeds about worship service structures and everything, there's a book called Christ-Centered Worship. It's written by a guy named Brian Chappell. He has one about preaching as well. It's called Christ-Centered Preaching. But I would recommend that if you really want to get into the weeds of it, as far as like planning a service and why you do these songs at this point and why you do communion at this point, things like that. It's something that book really goes into in a really interesting way. But you're exactly right that one thing that I like that you just pointed out was how we think of the word as kind of divorced from worship. Like the worship is the singing, and the word is just like the preaching is separate from that.
Yeah. And a lot of times we just tie like the preaching to like, that is what we think of when we think of service. Like the worship is just something we go in, sing some songs and check off.
Yeah.
And like,
like we just get it.
And then it's like, okay, we're into actual church now. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's weird because we live in a society in the West and in America in particular with our churches where, we often pump a lot of production money and value into the singing, but at the same time, we kind of oddly devalue the singing by not making it an instructional or formative time. Well, it's always formative, but I guess I would say like it's not a instructional time. It's merely a relational, emotional time. And I think we would both say if you want to have good worship, like in a biblical sense, when I say good, not just like it was enjoyable singing. If you want to have good worship, it needs to be a good marriage between relational, emotional, and instructional, like all these things coming together.
Yes.
And that's something that I think it's really easy to go on one side or the other of that extreme.
Yeah.
And, it's really easy to go and get too bogged down. Because I know I did this, like I spent a long time planning services as a music director, and it was easy for me to get too bogged down. It sounds bad, but like too bogged down in some of the theological aspects to where I kind of neglected the other realities of music, which are emotional and are artistic and stuff. Because God made music, and he made music for the church to be a marriage of the artistic expression and like the instructional growth of the church. But obviously in our culture as a whole in the West, I would say we have veered for the most part to the other extreme.
Yeah.
Where we think of good worship in terms of emotional responses.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I guess my question to you is like, how do you think where do you think we are like on with our understanding of worship, and where do you think we're off in our understanding of worship?
I think it's been a gradual shift in large part. There's still plenty of great worship, modern worship that's being written today that still hits on all three of those aspects.
Yeah.
So there is good artists out there. There's all that. You just have to be careful and find those out.
Yeah.
But for the large part, there's a heavy dose of examples where I think like you said, we've leaned too heavy and we've shifted too far away from actual theological instruction infused in our worship. And that's where, I mean, we can make music that sounds really good.
Yeah.
And we can make music that has a lot of emotional pulls to it. Like everybody in worship loves those big build moments and stuff like that in songs. And that's why I think there's some aspect, like I said at the beginning, just getting back to like the discussion of like hymns in their purpose in a church today still.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those hymns, yes, there's some hymns that are better than others.
Yeah.
But a lot of hymns are so like theologically based in instruction, and they are also written in a distinct format for corporate worship.
Yeah.
Whereas like a lot of times today, even when you bring in those modern songs that might not be very, as far as written in much depth theologically, they're still largely based on a performance level where the congregation is having to follow along with a leader in front of the stage and just following along with his basic performance of a lot of filler, a lot of words that might, sound great as far as an experience goes, but might not have a lot of depth to them.
Yeah, there's a reality that over time, with the invention, really it was kind of an invention of like Christian music as a industry, particularly like in the late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, as that like exploded, where not only regular music came on the scene as Christian, but worship music became played on the radio. It started to get like record deals and all this stuff. And a lot of
you saw worship bands too branch out to actually go into production on their own. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and a lot of that brought about an amazing amount of good things.
Yeah.
Like that's not horrible in any way. They brought about a lot of good, but one of the downsides that it brought about is that it made the most popular songs to sing kind of became one with the most popular worship songs on the air.
Yeah.
And so when you're writing a song,
and in people's minds sometimes became the best songs.
Exactly. Yeah. Like those two things, because you hear them on the radio and stuff. And so you get excited when your church sings them. It just kind of like gets all wrapped up together.
Yeah.
But radio is very different from the congregation, like we're singing together.
Yeah.
Radio songs are written most of the time as solos, like vocally and everything. Yeah. They're written with a lot of production value. They're written to catch your ear for the radio. Yeah. They're written so that when you hear them in the car and stuff, you're interested in them. And it's not bad to have songs on Sunday morning that are musically interesting or whatever.
No, yeah.
The difference is that on Sunday morning, you're looking for something more than merely musically interesting.
Yeah.
And you're also, like Andrew just hinted at, like you're looking also for songs that are people in the church are capable of singing along with.
Yeah.
Like you're looking for melodies that people can easily kind of learn and understand and pick up, because we've all been in a service where like we love a song, but because of like the key that it's in or something, like midway through the song, you're like, I want to sing this, but I just can't.
And a lot of times you just bail out.
Yeah. Like, and even if you try to like fight through that, it's just hard. Like if you know you sound bad, it's hard to like keep singing. And that's a real danger with like the radioification of worship music, is just because that kind of stuff is good, and we should listen to it and enjoy it, and it still glorifies God. But whenever we're planning or like trying to think about congregational stuff, we also have to consider, can the musician and the accountant and the engineer and the plumber, like, can musical people and non-musical people all gather to sing this together?
Yes.
Like, is it a melody, and is it words? Is it all this stuff, and so that we can all do it together?
Because that should be the goal, at least. Yeah.
Everything done during a corporate worship service should be done to help, push forward the goal of the entire church worshiping together.
Yeah.
Not like people on stage worshiping well and people observing, or like some people in the church worshiping well. Like, you want everybody to be able to worship together without barriers. And sometimes that can be a barrier, but the other danger of it is that the thing about hymns is that the time there's nothing holy about them, right?
No.
Like, when they were written, they were popular songs, just like songs that are written now are not automatically hymns. They're like, these hymns in a traditional sense. But the hymns that we have now, the reason that it's good to incorporate them into worship, or at the very least into your family's lives. Like, if you're somebody who doesn't, run a ministry or church, you don't probably have a lot of power about what your church sings.
Yeah.
But you have a power over like what you
can introduce
show
them
to your
your
kids.
family.
Yeah, your family and your kids and everything. And one of the reasons that they're powerful for us is because we get to take like the cream of the crop from generations past.
Yeah.
So there are some songs that are written in like this year and last year and stuff, that are really good. And I think they will potentially stand the test of time, and even decades from now, they'll still be sung. But there's a lot of songs that are written today that I think after a year or two won't be sung. And sure enough, that was the case with a lot of hymns. There's probably tons of hymns that were written and they were popular for like 2 years.
Yeah.
But the ones that stuck around have stuck around because they're really good.
Yes. Yeah.
And they say something powerful that throughout generations, Christians have agreed with.
And I would say a lot of those that have stood the test of time are also ones that are strong theologically based.
Most of them, yeah.
Most of them.
Absolutely. It's absolutely true. I mean, you think of, I don't know, one of my favorites is the song "Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah." It's really good. And that one's one of my favorites. There's plenty of old hymns that they often feel like they're way more profound than a lot of the songs we hear today.
Like "Be Thou My Vision" and
Timeless. I mean, "How Great Thou Art." It is well. How marvelous. I stand amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene. We sang that one this morning at church. "Come Thou Fount."
Yeah.
And just tons more. There's so many that have something a little bit more.
I think it's interesting too that people often, like even today, a lot of these like really, really talented artists take those hymns that have stood the test of times, and they come out with new versions and like try to update a little bit.
Yeah.
And obviously try to produce them a little differently to get a little better, maybe improve the sound or like do it a little differently. And like oftentimes you see that just as far as power in a corporate worship setting, like if you try to do a new version of it or something like that, it often throws off your congregation who are trying to sing it, just because they know, like for those songs, they know what to expect.
Yeah.
It's already been sung as far as rooted in their lives, from their past and everything. And it can be a lot more edifying for the body as a whole if you're just not messing with, how it was done.
Yeah.
And sometimes they can come off great, but sometimes they cannot. And you can, interesting.
When I was newer in the game as a music director, I made plenty of mistakes in that regard, where I just thought like, oh, I like this hymn and I like this update of the hymn.
Let's change it a little bit. Yeah.
And,
still the same words, still, still
like I made plenty of mistakes in that regard. Cause I don't know, there's often, there's nothing holy about the exact chord arrangement or whatever, but there's also just something that's very experientially powerful about like the history that is tied up in hymns and in the melodies and how people think of it. But like you said, I think that one of the reasons we would, not only with old hymns, but even modern hymns, the reason that it's good to really have a healthy diet of those is because they because they're hymns, and even songs that are written today can be written as hymns.
Yeah.
Because that just means a specific amount. Hymns have a specific structure to them, which makes them not merely a song, but a hymn.
Yeah.
And the reason that those often lend to better, more of a theological foundation in them is because the hymn structure and everything necessitates purposeful language. And it also means there's not generally as much musical tricks you can employ to dress it up. So it's kind of like you're building something that you know is only going to stand or fall on one support. And the one pillar that it has is how well it communicates truth.
Yes.
And if it does that well, then it's going to stand the test of time.
It's the lyrical content that really is the driver.
Yeah. Whereas like other songs, you can build it on tons of things. You can build it on a guitar riff. You can build it on, the skill of the vocalist and all that stuff.
Just a specific melody. Yeah.
And surely you can, if you got crazy and stuff, you can obviously make, whenever you're recording a hymn or something, you can obviously make it dressed up and fancy.
Yeah.
And again, we like production value. We like all that stuff. But hymns as a whole have generally been built more around theological power and stuff that's put into them than the window dressing of the song.
Yeah.
And I mean, we talked last time about this whole thing with like Josh Harris and Mark Driscoll and James McDonald, fill in the blank of Christian leaders that have kind of failed in different ways. And then this guy from Hillsong, I don't know his name or whatever, but
I forget his name too.
He kind of came out and said like, hey, I'm leaving the faith too.
Of course, in a public Instagram post.
Yeah, like I don't get it. It's like it's a little cynical, but it was almost like, hey, Josh Harris just got a lot of notoriety.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about leaving the faith. Maybe I should just do it now.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Like it's just like I hope that guy I hope he finds his way to Christ, and that God saves them. But he is a guy that grew up in Hillsong or whatever and was one of the songwriters for Hillsong for a number of years. And he wrote all these songs that we would all recognize.
Yeah.
But one, that's terrifying in one way that like, no matter who you are, even if you have what we would think as like an important Christian job, like you can still be faking it.
Yeah.
And whether he felt like he was faking it at the time or not, doesn't matter. Cause right now it's like, well, it was obviously fake.
Yeah.
Like, on some level it was faked.
Yeah.
Or at the very least you did not understand what you thought you understood about God.
Not fully. Yeah.
And so that's kind of scary. That's something to be, you have to be wary of that. Be wary of who you follow and whose song you sing. But in response to that, sometimes truth comes in the strangest of places. And there's a Christian band named Skillet. I'm sure everybody's heard of them.
Yeah.
They've been around for decades at this point.
They've been doing it a long time.
Probably like 30, almost.
Or at least
since
early
the 90s.
At
easily.
least early 90s.
Oh my goodness. I mean, honestly, like I don't listen to them as much anymore.
Yeah.
We kind of like to rag on them sometimes.
They're kind of like the stadium rock type sound.
You know, there's plenty of jokes that we throw around about that. Like they're a little bit like a Nickelback, whatever. But sometimes truth comes from like what you would think of as strange places. And the lead singer of this band, like, I
think his name's Stephen Cooper.
John Cooper.
John Cooper.
Stephen Cooper was a rapper.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, a rapper who kind of got popular in the Christian sphere and then said, I'm not a Christian anymore.
Yeah.
Because I used to listen to him a lot.
John Cooper.
John Cooper. But he wrote this post about these people leaving the faith. Did you read that?
Yeah. No, I think I shared it too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's on our Facebook page, but tell people what it was.
It was, I stumbled across it and I was just like, oh yeah, here's another, person kind of just commentary on the situation. Yeah. But then I actually took a second to actually read through his words. And it was
honestly shame on us for judging. I know that when I saw he had written something, I did the same thing. Or I was like, this probably isn't going to be cool. Yeah. But shame on me for like judging him that way.
That was kind of my fault. My initial gut check too was just
literally
like,
John Cooper, we apologize. We know you're listening. We know you're listening, John. Honestly, it was
because even now I think of them in like just pure rock circles. Like they're out, they do massive tours.
Yeah, they're
and all
not
that
writing
now.
worship music. Yeah.
So I was just like, I didn't know what I'd really get from it, but his comments were actually it based a lot, kind of like on our discussion on our last pod. He just kind of reiterated the point where like, what kind of like, where are we at in our Christian faith where we are looking to these 20-year-old worship leaders and, these people to like basically, that have just built up massive followings on social media and written, all this popular music and stuff on all the radio and stuff. Why are they the emblem of our faith and everything? And it was really kind of profound what he said. And he's just like, he kind of tied it back to the point where like, if the word of God alone isn't our source for biblical truth, it isn't our foundation. Yeah. And we're building up these 20-year-olds, then the Christian faith is really in trouble.
Yeah. He says, my conclusion for the church is that we must stop making worship leaders and thought leaders or influencers or cool people or relevant people the most influential people in Christendom.
Yeah.
That's a great, that's a fantastic statement. We have to be less reliant. This is something we talk about on the pod a lot. Be as reliant on the people that are actually in your life as your favorite author who lives states away. Mm-hmm. Like you should be more reliant on your family, your pastor, your local friends than your author who you like to read who lives in Seattle or whatever. Yeah. You need it's better to be dependent on the people that are proximate to you rather than the trendy people.
And like this particular example kind of hits home big time with like this topic of, actual corporate worship and how you should be viewing it, because clearly he's written some very popular songs that people love.
Number one songs.
Yeah. And yet you saw that based on allowing influence from just years and years of the world today and popular culture, you see that his faith was truly ungrounded.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think people, that's why, like you said, certain songs written today that are really quality will stand the test of times. But I think a lot of the songs that we see out there you will see fade just because there's not a lot of depth to them. And you also have the added layer now of this apostasy of these young Christian leaders that are walking away as well, that really, you should be taking their work on its merits at this point and not just on the production.
I just love what he says here. Like he says, I've been saying for 20 years and seemed probably quite judgmental that we are in a dangerous place when the church is looking to 20-year-old worship singers as our source of truth.
Yeah.
We have a culture that learns who God is from singing modern praise songs rather than learning from the teachings of the word. Mm-hmm. He said, I'm not being rude to my worship leader friends, parentheses, many who would agree with me. And I'm sure that many of the most famous worship leaders would 100% agree with this.
Yeah.
If they're faithful Christians, I'm sure that most of them would agree.
They would reiterate all that. Yeah.
I'm not saying that singers, John Cooper says, I'm joining my worship leader friends in saying that singers and musicians are good at communicating emotion and feeling. We create a moment and a vehicle for God to speak. However, singers are not always the best people to write solid Bible truth and doctrine. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we are too young, too ignorant of Scripture, too unaware, or too unconcerned about the purity of Scripture and the holiness of God that we are singing to. He said, have you ever considered the disrespect of singing songs to God that are untrue of his character?
Yeah.
That right there is a fantastic question. Have you ever considered how bad it is to be singing something about God that you would never say to him or say about him because it's not actually true? But there's tons of stuff in our songs that we sing, and there's tons of stuff of songs that are on the radio that if you wrote the words out, you'd be like, that's not really biblical. But when you sing it, you're like, oh, I love that.
You like the way it sounds. Yeah.
It's so good. And at the very end of this, I'm trying to find this section here where he says, listen to me as I scroll through an article. This is great.
Great podcast.
This is great radio.
Yeah.
Basically, he says, though, we are reaping the consequences of being a culture that sowed all of its all of its eggs into the basket of like emotionalism
of an
experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's honest. Like, one of the things we want to talk about eventually is like, why do people go or not go to church anymore? Why do young people go or not go to church?
Yeah.
And it's an honest thing. We have to look at ourselves and recognize like one of the reasons is because we put our eggs in the basket
of
relevance and experience and emotionalism, and you're going to reap. That means you weren't grounding anybody in anything. Yeah. And so eventually all these people, they filter out, they leave because there wasn't anything real there.
Yeah.
And so John Cooper like laid it out.
Yeah.
Let's get him on the podcast sometime.
I'd love to do. I think he has his own podcast.
Does he really?
Yeah.
Oh man.
I haven't listened to it, but I think I've seen that. But
yeah, I'm sure he does. If he doesn't, he's missing out probably.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting just because, like I said, when I was younger, I would have listened to Skillet all the time. Had so many of their albums. I could probably still sing any of their albums that were written before, like any of their albums that were out before 2008. I probably could sing almost every word of all those songs still. Yeah. I bet. Like they're in there somewhere. But since then, it's kind of the cool thing in hipster, whatever Christianity to be like, yeah, I don't listen to Skillet. I don't listen, like the bands that were like that. But I was like shocked. I read that post and I was like, this dude's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, this is a great post.
I was shocked just because of like the way things have, like even for them, like they've gotten so kind of main stage act and stuff like that I thought maybe they were beyond.
I almost thought well, I would have thought, and again, like this is an assumption, but like I would have thought they're so popular, they're so made, like he probably thinks shallowly about all these things, just like everybody else who's popular.
Yeah.
But then he comes out and writes this. He's like, oh, like, yeah, he's popular and stuff. And maybe some of their songs I feel like are shallow, but they're not worship songs. And also like, yeah, he might write these songs that I don't necessarily love, but like underneath it seems to be some real stuff going on. Yeah. Like that's like a lot of respect for that. But like he pointed out over and over again in this article, like we need to be based on truth as a church. I mean, we did our preaching lab yesterday as a church, and one of the sermons in 1 Timothy, there's that line in there that talks about the church being a pillar and buttress of the truth. Like as the church, we need to be known for our love for people and our truth. That's what we need to need to be known for those things.
And that extends to corporate worship. Yeah.
And we'll find a healthier Christianity when we're singing a healthier Christianity.
Yeah.
We'll find a healthier Christianity when we are worshiping healthier, more accurate, more biblical, more God-honoring songs together. We'll find more of that.
And that's where it's like oftentimes those hymns that have stood the test of times are the best, at least the best source today to go to, because those are drenched, a lot of them, with biblical truth. And so like, as far as like the best source you can go to, there's nothing beyond just, singing the words of scripture.
Yes.
And actually being founded on that. And that's where I think oftentimes, like if you're, like if you're going through your, like, don't go to your worship services on Sundays and detach your singing of songs and all that from the meat of the service or whatever you'd like to refer to. Like it's all one experience. It's all to reiterate theology. It's all to sing praises to God and sing praises to God how he wishes to be praised.
Yeah. It's not, your singing during church is not a emotional warm up for the preaching.
Yeah.
It is another form of preaching. It's really cool because in corporate worship, we get to preach to each other as we like sing together. Like we're singing these words together kind of in a means of like, we're teaching each other. Like you're hearing, like today, it was really a huge blessing because I was up on stage or whatever, but some people really like belt it out when they sing. And I heard a couple people that I know their voices kind of well. One of them is an older guy that I don't know well that well personally, but I just heard him like ripping out the lyrics to Come Thou Fount and I Stand Amazed. It was awesome. It was like there is something always encouraging about hearing the fellow Christians sing, especially those songs that we all really love and like rally around. And yeah, I think that I don't know, that was a reminder for me today. Like, hey man, that's something that's powerful about these hymns.
And it's not like, it's like, okay, there are, like we said, a lot of great modern songs as well that have been written, and a lot of them have been written in hymn format as well too. And so, but it's just it's a reminder to the Christian going to corporate worship week to week, to be coherent and to be analyzing the songs, the words that you're actually singing, and really cipher through what's really in there that is, like filler.
Yep.
What's really in there that is, just kind of, I guess, a production or a performance based, kind of how the song's been formatted, and how much of that song is actually speaking sound biblical truth.
Yeah, because we want to be formed in all things. We don't want to read a book that is a bunch of filler nonsense.
Yeah.
And we don't want to sing a song that's a bunch of filler nonsense. Yeah. Like, we want to be formed by things.
You might be able to sing it really great in your church and it sounds cool, and they might be able to play it really well.
But it does no good if it's not solid.
And if it's not worshiping God how he would best be worshiped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So who's some of your favorite hymn, and then favorite...
We getting into
new
recos
stuff. Yeah. That would be the recos today, I guess.
My favorite hymn, as far as an oldie, is really "Be Thou My Vision."
Okay.
It's probably the one that just always stands out to me, no matter where I hear it. But then, as far as a modern artist that I'm really into, I really
know who you're gonna say. I bet. Go ahead and say it.
Ghost Ship.
Oh, okay. All right. I wasn't gonna say that. That's cool.
Or who? Who are you thinking?
I thought you were gonna say City of Light.
Oh, I do love City of Light.
That's
as well.
my pick. But Ghost Ship just put out a new CD, didn't they? Or something?
I believe they put out an EP.
An EP?
Maybe?
It's a couple new songs. I saw it online.
But I really like Ghost Ship. They have several songs on their albums that are written in hymn format.
Yeah.
I would say. And City of Light, like you were saying too.
Yeah. City of Light, they're probably my favorite right now. They have a new EP out last year called Yet Not I.
Yeah.
And that's a great album. But favorite hymn for me, one of my favorites is Guide Me, O That Great Jehovah. That's probably, that one's one of my favorites. There's also one called Oh Love That Will Not Let Me Go that I really like.
I would say too, even with these bands that we're mentioning and stuff, also you have to be critical of them even as they continue to grow, and a lot of them get more and more followings in this, modern age.
Yeah.
So even as they produce new music, it's not like you can just take any song they do out and just blast it and you think it's just the best thing ever, but judge it on its merits.
Yeah. Well, and pay attention.
Pay attention to what they're putting out.
And just because something's old or just because something's a hymn doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah.
And just because what we're saying is learn to evaluate music a little bit so that God can use it as a tool to help us love him more.
And that all comes on a basis of having knowledge of scripture.
Yeah.
And having knowledge of just being studying of how God calls worship to be done.
Yep.
Through his word first and foremost. So
absolutely. Yeah. If you don't know the word, then whenever something is sung or said during a sermon or prayed during a prayer, you won't know that was a little off.
And it can sound really great to you, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We'll believe a million things that aren't true unless we have a standard. So enjoy the music. You don't have to become a music Nazi.
No. Yeah.
But
there's lots of good stuff out there, but just be critical.
Yeah. Be critical and be enjoying it in the right ways and everything. But thanks for hanging out with us. I think we did all right.
I think it was pretty good.
We did all right without Jeremy,
for being down a third of the pod.
I don't know what Jeremy would, what he would have said about anything in particular here. He probably would have agreed.
He likes hymns. He likes
hymns.
Yeah.
He likes Be Thou My Vision a lot. He might have recommended that one as well.
Yeah. We have a lot of friends too that are real sticklers and only want to sing the hymns. So we're not quite on that level.
No, I'm not at all. You can sing anything so long as it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in Jeremy's place, he wouldn't recommend this band probably, but I'll just offer up another reco because we need 3.
Yeah.
And so mine would be a band called Indelible Grace. If you feel like you don't know where to start in looking up hymns, because a lot of us know the popular ones.
Yeah.
There's a band called Indelible Grace, and they just have tons and tons and tons of hymns that they've re-recorded and sort of modernized in some ways, but stayed really faithful to the old hymns. And you can find just tons of powerful songs that they've, are decades, hundreds of years old that they've kind of fixed up a little bit.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend them as well. So, well, since Jeremy can't say goodbye, we'll have to sign off, and we'll keep you guys up to date on all the fantasy football goings on of the year. I'm sure everybody's interested in that.
Yes.
And
Team Threat Level Midnight.
Threat Level Midnight. I forget what my team is now. I don't know what mine is. So, but I'll be going for 3 in a row.
Yeah.
So, we'll see what happens. But until next time, we'll see all you guys next time.
See you, folks.